there's still some change around the periphery, but there is certainly, because of the degree of change over the last, say, 7 or 8 years, you definitely have the problem you refer to, which is that, say, as an SBC implementation, you're doing protocol normalization between a very wide range of devices, many of whom have some...
Is that kind of like a gateway when you say protocol normalization?
It's sitting at a point in the network where you've got, say, signaling coming in from an end-user device, and you're passing out to a call control agent. And the different implementations from different manufacturers, and they have different views on a particular protocol.
You could call that a gateway, theoretically, right? Just
but what you do is you terminate 2 calls on either side, and you do a little bit of fiddling around in the middle. You look at the header and go, oh wow, this guy's doing this, and that's not really strictly correct, so we'll correct that and pass it on. But you don't necessarily have to do very much for any 2 cases, but there's at least 100 devices on one side, potentially, and another 100 on the other side. So that's a huge job, which comes about because the SIP protocol, because an IETF protocol, tends to be less precisely specified and relies on interpretation. The ISO protocols tend to be much stricter. And you're alluding to what's going to be, I think, the same problem with IMS, is there's potentially 10 different components if you take the strictest decomposition. There's perhaps 10 to 15 different interfaces defined, and therefore, you just do the math. There's like 10 suppliers for this component, all with their own interpretation, talking to 10 suppliers for this component. So interoperability will be a big deal. And there is an IMS forum which is starting to do IMS PubFests. You go along, and it's roughly at the state now where SIP was 7 or 8 years ago. We're uncovering pretty fundamental misinterpretations. I mean, we think the other guys misinterpreted. They probably think but
it's all a matter of perspective.
Indeed.
And some people, I mean, there's some theories, some conspiracy theories that some people intentionally have, some of the larger players intentionally...
We're aware of some of the larger players who have, it'd be generous to call it misinterpretation, it's almost certainly proprietary. And it means that
accidentally, they've accidentally made a mistake.
It turns out that while they are IMS compliant, only their signaling controller will talk to their media game. And they won't tell you what they've done. And it's questionable whether you can reverse engineer it without infringing on intellectual property.
And those are going to be some of the things that our industry will be grappling with for the next 5 years, it sounds like.
The carriers would, when they discover this, the carriers probably haven't figured this out yet, but manufacturer A is playing games in this area. When they discover it, they will lean on the guys and eventually it will go away.
And I know the IMS forum is doing a bunch of interoperability, having interoperability events, and I think they work with the University of New Hampshire, and they've done things at our internet telephony events as well, where they've worked on interop. So I guess that's going to continue to be an issue. Same with the SIP forum. I know the SIP forum has SIP-its, and they have those interop events.
SIP-its up to number 20 something. IMS forum, I think, they're only on the 2nd or 3rd PubFest. But it is a very valuable forum. I think for us, going to SIP-it was immensely valuable. Just getting exposure to a wide range of devices and figuring out where we might have got things wrong, fixing up other people's. IMS PubFest is going to be equally valuable. But it's just a reflection of where they are in the process compared to where SIP was 7 or 8 years ago.
So what's next for your company? What can customers expect?
We're continuing to invest in session border control. That's probably taking 50% of our R&D. We're continuing to invest in our MPLS products. There's quite a bit of ongoing work there, particularly in the optical area, starting up again. We're doing a lot of work in routing and IP routing, both unicast and multicast. So it's more organic.
Right.
At the moment, we're not planning on jumping into a whole new protocol area because the cost of entry is very high. And to be frank, most of our resources are very well occupied enhancing the current product range.
That seems like it. So what about wireless growth? Is that anything that you're looking at right now?
We see wireless, and a lot of the people interested in session border control are wireless carriers.
Right.
So it tends to be the protocols we have in our kit bag are equally applicable to wired and wireless. There's some specific wireless tweaks, but the core protocol code is pretty much the same in those networks. And in an IMS architecture, you theoretically can't tell whether the core transport is wireless or wired.
Have you thought about transcoding as an area to
Yeah.
get into?
Almost all of the session border deployments our customers make have some element of transcoding in. And it may be quite simple that the media forwarder can do 2 or 3 codecs and can transcode, say, 711 to 729.
Sure.
Some of them are actually doing, it's called tromboning, where you take a call into your session border controller, you send it off to a specialized media transcoder, you bring it back and route it on. And so there are vendors who are specializing in like media transcoding. They have very dense, very DSP-rich platforms, which perhaps they had developed to do voice conferencing. They now discover it can be very useful for media transcoding. In some kinds of networks, media transcoding is very important because it's a peer-to-peer gateway between 2 carriers. Carriers might be internally standardized on 729, and this guy's 723.
Sure. This is an appropriate conversation for this event, actually, the peering event that we're at, right? It seems to happen quite often. So I know a couple players in the space. I know Ditech Networks is in the space. I know that Audio Codes has a product they announced a couple years back. Dialogic is capable of playing in the space, although I'm not sure if they have a transcoding product. Are there any other companies?
One I do know is Convidia.
Yes, Convidia, right, the conferencing company that's evolved.
They just have to have a platform that's really DSP rich, very dense. It's really suited to that.
That's great. So that's it's pretty exciting. So it gives us a good idea of what your company's doing. And are there any just parting thoughts that you want to share with the viewers?
I think this has been quite for me, being a supplier to a manufacturer who supplies to a carrier, who eventually supplies to an end user. I'm a long way back in the chain. So I quite enjoyed the conference so far because it's very oriented towards the carrier user experience. And there was some very interesting perspectives in the manufacturing.
Absolutely.
To do with regulatory forces and the effect of competition pricing.
And that's usually one level below where you, or above, depending on which direction you're looking at where you play, right?
By the time that kind of a manufacturing experience comes back to us, it's been going down into a list of features. We can't see where it came from.
Right.
So this gives, I like the context here, it's useful.
Thanks. So you've been listening to Tony Downs, who's with Data Connection, and my name is Rich Tehrani, and I am the president of TMCnet. You can find out more about TMC at TMCnet.com, and you can also find out about me personally and follow my blog at Tehrani.com. Thank you very much.